What's up, folks? It's Pete Thorne. Welcome to the studio. This is my video on the Friedman JEL50 tube guitar amplifier device. That's, of course, the Jake Ely's signature 50-watt tube amp. The JEL50 features two channels. It's got one channel that's basically like a Plexi circuit but with a master volume, and a second channel that's basically like a 2203 or 2204 style circuit, the two input style. So think a little bit more gain, master volume. And then you of course get a boosted mode in this amplifier as well, where you can pull out the gain 2 control. That adds another level of gain, gives you a nice boost for solos and stuff like that. You get some bright switches there, so you can fine tune the brights on both channels. There's also an effect loop, and there's a thumb control on the back. Presence is on the back as well. So in my video, I decided I would try and do something a little bit different than I've seen other folks do in their videos. I thought I would try and see how close I could get with the JEL50 to an old 4-hole 50-watt JMP Marshall, my old 72 had up there, as well as this Fawn 2203 down here. So your basic, early 70s through late 70s style Marshalls. And this amp kind of designed to cover the tones of both of those amplifiers as well as give you an added boost mode. But how close does it actually come to those old classics? I'm old friends with Dave Friedman, and it's funny, when he designs amps, I know a lot of times he'll go back and forth between original amps and then the one that he's working on, the new one that he's designing, to just check and see if he's in the ballpark or see if there's anything missing, or if he's indeed like achieving the classic circuit tones and maybe even improving upon them. But I see these guys put their amps out, and then many times what happens is, people start talking on the internet and they'll say, oh, it's got way more gain than the old ones, or way less gain, or it's darker sounding, or, it's just not voiced the same as the old one. And so I always think it's great to compare. Actually, just A-B, direct compare, and listen. Use your ears and see what you hear. So I decided in my video what I would do is come up with a little track and then record some parts and just directly cut between them using the JEL50 dialed in as close as I could to both of these vintage amplifiers. So in that song at the beginning, you heard 2 bars of the JEL50. I double tracked the part and hard panned it. And then in bar 3 and 4 goes over to my old 50-watt Marshall JMP. Same part, double tracked, hard panned. And I dialed in the amps to sound as close as I possibly could. So you're hearing JEL50, 50-watt Marshall, JEL50, JMP 50-watt. Then a part comes in up the middle, and that is the JEL50 first for 2 bars, and then it goes to the 2203, the Fawn Marshall down there. Once again, I dialed them in to sound as close as I could possibly get them. Then towards the end of the tune, I'm just all on the JEL50, and I use the boosted mode for the lead part. In order to get the tones as close as I did, and I think they're really, really close, like on the Plexi mode, I ran the channel 1 master on the JEL all the way up, basically. So to get it out of the way as much as possible, because basically you want to make it, as close to the old 4-hole Marshall that doesn't have a master as possible. And I mean, the tones are damn close. If anything, the JEL was just ever so slightly louder, which can come down to like voltages in the amplifier and stuff like that, tube complement. I thought it actually sounded a little punchier and healthier than my Marshall. My Marshall sounded a little bit more like, compressed and just a little quieter, but the tones are really, really, really similar. I also think had I used the same set of preamp tubes in both amplifiers, like the same, maybe even just switch them between amps, that the tones would even be closer. Because I know this one's got a different tube in the front end than mine does and stuff. But anyways, I think the tones were so close. And then the tones of the 2203, the Fawn one, and the Friedman, for that, I was over on channel 2, but the gain boost off. I was using the first bright setting on here because that matches the type of bright cap that's in the old Marshall. And I had the master quite high on the Friedman, which is the way I like to run these amps anyway. I don't really like the sound of the 2203 or 4 circuit with the master down low. I like it up, like cooking, like around 6, 7, 8 even. Just the amp opens up, it sounds better, doesn't sound as woolly, just gets a great tone. So that's the way I ran. I mean, it's like really loud, but sound great. And if you got an attenuator or a power station or something, you can manage that. So I'm gonna play a little bit more through the amps now for you. You're gonna hear me A-B between the JEL and the 4-hole and the 2203, and you can hear all the different sounds, how close they are and all that good stuff. And I'll also solo those parts that I recorded for the song outside of the mix, and you can hear it go directly from the JEL to the 4-hole Marshall, etc., etc. Let's compare some amps. Here we go. Okay, so I just recorded my first guitar parts here in the little comparison video, and basically I'm using the 72 Marshall up there. I'm running into the treble channel, got the volume or gain on about 2 o'clock, 2:30, something like that. And then the tone controls are all kind of somewhere in the vicinity of a little bit under, a little bit over noon. Now on the JEL50 over here, I've got very similar settings. I cranked the master all the way up because that sounded the most, as you would imagine, like the old JMP Marshall. Using the big bright cap on the Friedman, the 4700 picofarad, because that's what I got in that old Marshall up there. Tone controls I've got maybe in a slightly different settings, but like within a number of the Marshall, just to kind of get the tone as close as possible. I mean, it's different tube complements in each amp, so keep that in mind. That's going to affect the sound, but they're pretty darn close. So let's take a look here. I can, on my amp switcher, go back and forth really easy here, so I'll just record a track and then we're going to listen back to it, flipping between the two. I will start on the JEL50 amp and then I will switch to the Marshall. Okay, I'm going to take a listen back now and see what I am hearing. Okay, like they're super duper close. I would say the Marshall for some reason is a hair dirtier sounding, like a hair, and maybe not in a way that I'm actually liking at the moment. It sounds like it's collapsing a little bit more, like maybe going into the phase inverter, it's just like getting hit hard, or maybe I need to look at that tube and replace it or something. Maybe it's getting tired. They're both great sounds and they're super comparable, I think. But I think that this goes to show that that amp really hangs with my old Marshall quite well, if that's the sound that you're looking for, that cranked up, you know, Plexi, basically making full power with the volume 1 control up around, you know, 2 or 230. Take one more listen here. I hear it right in there on that A chord when I'm going between the kind of the two notes, the fourth to the fifth. It just sort of sounds like it's like collapsing a little bit. You know what I mean? Interesting comparison, I think. Okay, so now I recorded a part up the middle with the Fawn 2203 down there. So this is a little bit more of an unfair fight because that's 100 watter. It's the only one I had access to. But, you know, same preamp circuit anyway. And when I volume match them, they sound really, really close. I do need to bring either the Fawn amp down 3 dB or the JEL up 3 dB because that's just what you got to do with 100 versus 50 watter. And for this, I'm setting the controls almost exactly the same. These amps, because of the design, they just sound, to me, a little bloated and a little anemic when you run them at kind of the way most people run them, actually. The preamp gain all the way up, or maybe like on 8 or something, and then they got the master down around 2 or 3. I've never really dug that sound. Where I think they sound great and where the magic is when you get the master up above 6. And then use the other control, the preamp gain control, maybe a little bit lower. Because the more you turn it up, the more fat you get. But the more you bring up the master, the more you drive into the phase inverter, you get some grind out of that tube, turn down the preamp gain, it's not quite as fat, the bright cap comes into play a little bit more, and opens things up a little bit, gives you a little more aggressive sound, a little less low end, and it's all in that magic balance. So right now, the tone I got going sounds like this. Pretty great. That's the 2203. Switching over now to the Friedman, check this out. Now I'm going to volume match that so that it's exactly the same when I go and I mix this. And I think what you're going to hear is that it's a very, very, very similar sound. Maybe even more similar than the two other amplifiers sound. Maybe even more similar than my Marshall 50 sounded to the Jake amp. Let's go back to the Marshall, and now I'm just going to play a little bit with the master and show you this thing, because I think this is an important thing to just touch on in this video, how cool they sound when you open up that master. So this is with the master down around 4 or 5. And that's with the master quite low, like down around 2. I'm not going to change the volume on this. It's going to sound quieter on the video. Kind of bloated, a little hashy on the top end at the same time, you know what I mean? Now check out what happens when I get it up into the magic zone here. Something like that. Pretty cool, raw. The sound fills in. It kind of fills in a way that takes care of the hash, and it was also just kind of like a little anemic. But now we're getting more distortion, and the mids are kind of filling in this great way, and it just sounds cool. So anyway, you can get that on this guy. Let's switch back over to the Friedman now, and we'll do the same thing. Let's bring the master up and down. Now, one thing, Dave in this amplifier has taken care of a little bit of the bloat that's in the standard 2203 circuit. It's a subtle tweak. He just leans it out a little bit. It's not dissimilar to what's going on in a PT100 as well, or PT15. Just fine-tuned a little bit, so there's not so much bass pushing through the preamp. And I think this amp has that going on a little bit, so it cleans it up a little bit. It sounds a little better to me than the Marshall at a low master volume setting with the preamp gain up higher. I played the silliest solo that I've ever played in my life, I think, with the gain boost on. I don't know, I was just on a tear. I was in a mood. Stuff like that. But anyways, I wanted to show you just real brief here, because this video is mainly about the lower gain modes, but I wanted to show you how much more gain you get, of course, with the higher gain mode. So let's start off with the preamp gain on 10, and this is in the kind of 800-ish or 2203-ish, 2204-ish mode. Turning on the boost. So that's in your boost mode with lots of sustain for solos and stuff like that. If you want to go beyond that, hit a damn pedal. Thanks you guys so much for watching my video on the JEL50 50-watt tube guitar amp, Jake Ely signature amp from Friedman. I think I was pretty successful in getting it to sound a lot like those other two amplifiers that it was kind of based on and tried to improve upon. You can check it out further at the link that you find down there in the video description below. Click there, it'll take you to more info about the JEL50. Please hit subscribe if you haven't. Come back and see me for more videos real soon. I'm Pete Thorne. Take care.